you know, uh, nothing on the fantasy football radio do they sit back and visually look at somebody's complete team and discuss, especially with this news of Chuba being on
Oh yeah.
IR now. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I've seen. I don't know if they do that in the discords and behind paywalls. That may be a value added thing that sites charge for. I don't know. I've since I don't pay for a lot of sites, I only pay for two. One is Fantasy Pros because their bookkeeping and
Oh
whatnot
yeah.
allows
Yeah.
me with 41 teams to keep up with everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's smart management there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, using the tool there. And if some other place comes up with a better tool, then I've got some ideas on how if I was doing something, I would do it. And I use a 4x4 just for data. They give uh, snaps and targets and
Yeah.
touches, and
Yep.
it's just my choice. Just that general, you know, uh, easy. And I know it's going to be archived there, so I don't have to rush and
Yeah.
disappear, whatnot. And so it's good that way. So those are the two I pay for,
Yeah, and
but not for slavishly looking at their rank. I trust your view, especially. I felt like as I look back, I think I would not have made it this far with as many teams I did without, some good guidance from our numbers and just kind of your rookie, kind of that better than zero thing happening. You definitely brought me on board on that. And, looking forward to refining that, getting our numbers, off season. We got lots to do to get ready for probably my best balls in early June, probably start,
yeah. Yep.
you know. So we've got this block of time to do that. So and I think our podcast the next couple of weeks will just be we'll finish week 18, probably more for props and whatnot. I really don't want to imagine people are playing. I mean, look at all the things dealing with in
Yeah.
week 17, and then teams like the Chiefs going to set players down. It's going to be a free for all. I mean, you talk about variance. I mean, that may work for some people, but it's hard to imagine that 12 people would relish week 18 and the crap. I mean, we may be living in week 18. We just call it week 17. I don't know. But anyway, those are some things I'm thinking kind of pre-show here. So,
Yeah, and I could see situations where some leagues might make some decisions going forward if the NFL is going to have a um high bye week on week 14 again. I could
uh,
see some leagues deciding, some 10 and 12 team leagues deciding, hey, we're only going to allow four teams into the championship, and we're going to start doing our championship weeks 15 and 16 from now on.
yeah,
I could see that decision being made because as we've gone to 17 weeks, I think we're seeing different reactions in how teams handle this end of season. And it all comes down to guys that, you know, week 17, Chuba Hubbard is signed for next season. So why not give him a week more to heal by by getting rid of his, don't risk any further injury and start getting him his surgery early so he's a week fresher when it comes to next season. And I don't think we would have seen that in the old days of the NFL with so many guys not under contract for the next year and looking at a situation where the team, quite frankly, is like, well, I don't care if I wear this guy out. He probably isn't coming back next year, but now you have a sort of just above average because I don't think Chuba Hubbard is a superstar by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think anybody's going to confuse him with a top 15 running back in the league. But for fantasy football, he's a solid RB2 starter. So he's in that 20 to 25th best, maybe in the league type of discussion. And now you're seeing those guys shut down. What we see with the Chiefs in week 18 makes sense. Everybody's going to be shut down. But now, do we see Josh Allen get pulled at a certain point of this game this week? There's so much. We don't have enough data points because this 17-week thing is still very new. And I think it takes sometimes as many as 3 or 4 years for teams to come to their new normal. So this is going to be highly irregular. I have only 2 leagues, and they're both free leagues, just fun leagues. I usually do some ESPN test leagues just to be so I could stay familiar with the ADPs and the formats and different settings, different websites.
Yeah.
And this year, usually in the past, I've done maybe 10 teams, and I space them out by about a month each or several weeks each. And I just, I start very early. As soon as they open them up, draft a team that early, and then I go every few weeks. This year, I didn't do that. This year, I only have an early league that I drafted in May and a league in August that I drafted. So I did just 2 data points there. Those leagues will play week 17 and 18 for their championships. So they get to be chaos. But you're right. I think, anybody who's playing week 18 for a championship for money, it needs to have their head examined because you're going to be talking about a lot of uncertainty here. We know the only other running back left active on the roster for Carolina that we have seen this year is actually Blackshear, but he played special teams. So he was always going to be active because he was good on special teams. But now we're going to see maybe somebody else that we haven't seen all year, because Sanders is gone, Brooks is gone, and now Chuba Hubbard is gone. It's going to mean somebody from the practice squad coming up. And, the guess is, most likely that's going to be Mike Boone, who we've seen sometime in the past. But what are we going to see out of him? Is there going to be a split? I think Boone is more likely to get some third down work away from Blackshear. But that's just a speculation and a guess at this point.
And so focusing on Chuba, then I think I'll go find my league that I have him. So then I'm thinking, because this just broke, people do this blocking concept.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, do you block Raheem Blackshear? Or do you leave him dangling, hoping, because right now I feel like there could be a 0 or like a 12, 13. In other words, I see a broad level of outcomes. So, if my opponent wants to pick him up, I'm not sure I block that. I'm not sure I don't hand that off. I mean, if I was in a dynasty or something, I'd probably get on the message board and make some type of noise about, well, I guess I better blow my budget or something and hoping they'll blow theirs and get all feisty because if I'm in a dynasty and somebody takes that bait, my opponent, and puts a lot of money on it to try to grab it from me, I wonder if they wouldn't kind of feel like in a psychological way, oh, I guess I paid a lot of money. I guess I should play him. Kind of almost you let them set the trap.
Yeah, and
I don't
there's
know. I'm just playing in my head some of these things. I probably need to look at the DApps, but that's one thing, kind of a contrarian. And I will say this: I'm looking at the DApps. It's below average for running backs. Everything else looks play them all from Carolina. So the weakest would be the running backs, and it's predicted a 48 burger. So we might kind of a husky kind of game here. So so I'm thinking back and forth there, Dennis, on strategy like that. The blocking strategy. I can see a lot of different ways people approach the so-called blocking concept that you do.
yeah, interesting that you brought that up because I did that exact same thing here moments before we started the show today because we do have Chuba Hubbard
Yes,
on our dynasty
that's
team
true.
on FPPC.
Yeah,
So here's what I did. I didn't look to see who was available. I looked to see who was likely to need a running back this weekend
right.
to substitute. And I don't think any of the three teams, because in FPPC and Dynasty, you go up against three other teams over a 2 week period.
Right.
I don't see any of those teams that are likely to grab Blackshear, who could indeed be a landmine. He could be one of those fantasy football landmines where you put him in and you don't get much at all. I mean, on Thursday night, he wasn't a complete landmine, but I heard people, oh, Zach Charbonnet is going to get you 100 yards, 100 total yards from scrimmage and maybe one or two touchdowns. He's a must play this week. And he gave you like 10 PPR points. So,
Yeah. So Dennis, I pulled our league up, Boilermaker Crawfish, and I see you got Madison in there. You
yeah.
set Tuba down. So is there anybody that I mean, this is Dynasty, a little different than a redraft situation. Uh, I really do like Vidal and Estime for next year.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
pleased to see. I think we have a edge, a leg up for next year a little bit, and I think we're going to get. I'm crossing fingers now. At least third place, maybe second. I mean, if crazy things happen, maybe first. But we're we're in the mix to get paid on this
Yeah.
team, and I really like to see uh, vodka. I guess it is not Vidal. Vodka and Estime Acres. You break glass if you need him kind of person, but nothing, no, not a lot of upside. That's a good streamer for the regular season. Chuba could be something next year he signed, so I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I like Chuba for next year. I like Bucky
So are you
Irving.
looking at any running backs on the wire? I
So
see
I
you've got
did put in a bid.
Blackshear.
Yeah. So I did
Yeah.
put in a bid for Blackshear because here's the strategy I used this week.
Uh-huh.
Since it was the last week
Yeah.
of the year, and I knew, there was baggage that we wouldn't be using next year because even though this is dynasty, you have to cut down. So I knew that at wide receiver, I got rid of the kid from Miami, Washington, because I know we're deep in wide receivers. So I'm not worried about that position for next year. I've got five very good wide receivers that'll be back. So I dropped and added the Indy defense because I didn't want to give up
Now,
Green
let me
Bay's
ask you,
defense. I wanted
can
to take
we
a look.
move Chuba to the IR yet?
We cannot. We cannot. So they did not put him on IR yet. So if they put him on IR today,
Well, that's what it says at 10
yeah,
o'clock this morning.
10 o'clock this morning, but on FPPC is
It
still
hasn't.
officially not listed
But
as
if it
IR.
does, then
Then
we
we're in
don't.
good shape. Yeah.
Yeah, then we can. Is there somebody else for next year? Is this an opportunity for next year to grab a deep play that may or may not have we you thought about that possibility?
Yeah, it's pretty lean right now at
Let's
both
take a look.
running back and wide receiver. Um, One guy that
What about
I,
Ty Johnson?
yeah, I don't think he's going to be anything significant because Ray Davis is going to end up, if
But
anything,
I mean
taking
for
more
next year.
for next year. I just
Duh,
don't think.
yeah.
Yeah, I think Ty
Zamir
Johnson.
White is out there. I'm just
Yeah,
looking at some of these names.
yeah. The
Elijah Mitchell.
interesting guy that I had actually thought of picking up is a guy who's been absolutely trashed this year.
Mhm.
But you know how I like to go on back class
Yeah,
on guys. I've thought of picking up Johan Dotson, who's been absolutely awful, and hope he lands on a better team next
yeah.
year.
A true
So that's
favorite.
one guy. Malachi Corley from the Jets
So you're
is
thinking
another guy.
more a rookie kind of thing.
I'm thinking young player to
So you're
plug
not
and
looking at
play.
some of these seasoned players.
Nah, probably not. I'm looking at guys that I think can give us more upside for future years than a guy that we know who he is because at the end of our draft next year,
Mhm.
if there's no rookies available, I can always grab Ty Johnson with a fourth or fifth round draft pick next year in the rookie draft because you can draft veterans. And I don't think anybody's going to pick him up and protect him as their guy. So I think we're in pretty good shape.
Chris Brooks is out there. I'm
Chris
just
Brooks is an interesting pickup because Chris Brooks could be the second banana to Jacobs next year. And if something happened to Jacobs, we could be in for a good
I'm
player.
just so do you like this idea of
Yes.
scouring and
Yes.
picking up if I'm in dynasty?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm thinking about getting rid of Braden Cooks from our team. The only reason I held on to him is to see if we get some late news here. Because what if Waddle and Higgins go down? Then we're forced to play Brandon Cooks this week,
Yeah.
and
They
that's kind
said
of where I am.
Waddle was kind of looking like he might play.
Yeah, Waddle looks like he's going to play. Higgins looks like he's going to play. But 2 days ago,
Yeah,
they said Chuba Hubbard
was going
was
to
looking
play.
like he was going to play, and now all of a sudden they've reversed course. So
So on this team is the big question Cup.
yeah, I don't know what to do with Cooper Cup, but I don't believe like that's a game where I want to look at the defensive matchup
Mhm.
to see if the Rams are going to be able to effectively run the ball against Arizona. If they
Mhm.
are,
Mhm.
then I might make a decision on Cup. As you see, I put Zach Ertz in the other flex for right
I'm not,
now.
I'm not I'm not ashamed of that pick. That seems like a sure 10 points.
I think it's a solid because this is tight end premium. I think he's a
And
solid 8 to
he
12
could
guy.
have an upside.
He could have a huge upside if he finds the end zone.
Right.
And Washington still doesn't have a second reliable receiver.
Yeah.
So the tight end ends up getting more play. And he last week we didn't think he was going to play,
Yeah.
and he did okay. This week we're looking at a situation where he's not on the questionable list at all. So
Yeah.
he did not make the injury report. And they kind of went light on him snaps last week. That's the only thing that concerns me.
Mhm.
I expect Cooper Cup to bounce back. I look at the data and you cannot find 3 consecutive bad games from Cooper Kupp unless he's sitting out. Like every time he's had a bad game
He's come
in the
back.
past, he's come back. So here he's had 2 bad games in a row. The first was weather related, so I'll give him that one. And then last week, he just looked ordinary out there. And so that has me concerned. But when I look back at the data, I mean, I went back 2 years on him.
Yeah.
I can't find a case where we've gotten 3 bad weeks in a row out of Cooper Kupp. Last year, weeks 11 and 12, he gave you 2 and 4 and bounced back with 15, 25, 25. So he bounced back after 2 bad games last year. And there's no other occasions that I can find in his history where he's had 3 games under 10 in a row in his career. I mean, that's incredible for a wide receiver, by the way. That's a consistency that you don't often see. So, and that's with Puka and without Puka. So there's no difference there. The difference has been the Rams' offense has looked really bad the last 2 weeks in the passing game. By the way, that's actually making me really feel good about my consensus ratings attack this year.
Yeah.
Because Matthew Stafford was a guy that I had way below year-end points and points per game in my consensus ratings. And people were saying, where's Stafford? Why isn't he in your top 20? He should be in your top 15. And I was like, this is what the data is saying. I'm not saying that you go ahead and necessarily bench him if he's on your team as as your second quarterback in a super flex. That's a hard decision to make because of his track record. What I'm telling you is this is what the data is saying. Because he's had these fluctuations, and he's now had 4 games under 10 points this year in 15 games. That's huge. So actually 5 games. That's a third of the games, Professor. He's been under 10 points this year.
How many has he been under 19 points?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, this is 6-point touchdowns. Okay, that I do my data in. So that might skew it a little bit.
So 20.
But so 20 points is considered a good game in that setup. 2, 3, 4, 5. He's only had 6 out of 15 games over 20. So
Dennis, that
9 games
is roughly a COM-score near 30, which is a
awful.
QB 2-3 type. He's right on that border of even being a 3.
Yeah.
He is a backup. In other words, just looking at, he's somebody for a streamer for, that is how I would play him with that kind of data profile.
Yeah, he's been 25th ranked in my consensus data.
Yeah, right there. And 2-3.
And that's with a little bit of back class because his weekly value rank is 22nd. His MVP score for this year is a putrid 20. That's 26th best. That's awful.
So, I look forward to when we got enough to be able to tease the differences between the COM, the MVP, and some of that. Because the equation might say 60% MVP, 20% COM, or it might be the other way. And to have more of that universal rating. I don't know what we'll have to think of some funny name to call that. I mean, we kind of tried to do that. I set the limits to be each of our metrics to be equal. So I just took a simple average this year just to see.
And it seemed to work very well in drafts, by the way, because when I took that data and I applied it to ADP and I said first 3 rounds of the draft, I need guys that are 5 or 6 for 6.
Yeah.
I need guys in the green.
Yes.
In the first round, I wanted all 6.
Yes.
Second round, I wanted all 6. Third round, I started accepting 5 of 6.
Yeah.
By the fifth round, I was accepting 4 out of 6.
Yeah.
And the idea was, if I look at my teams, Professor,
Yeah.
the only players that I would grade as a quote unquote bust that did not perform well for me this season at any point in the season, okay? And I'm looking at a minimum 4-game stretch of really good performance to not call them a bust. The only busts are due to injury. CMC never made it up into that classification, but he was hurt. Other guys, Chris Godwin started off. He was top 10. He was top 5 in some metrics.
With him.
We had him nailed. We had Rashee Rice nailed.
Yep.
I mean, these were guys that were all good. And in fact, they were 5 of 6 kind of guys who were being drafted in 3 or 4 of 6 acceptable territory.
Yeah.
And, other players, I mean, we did incredibly well with our draft logic this year, both from and that was using the metrics evenly because we didn't know how to adjust them. I think with further research, what we're going to find is that a different position might yield a different formula.
Yes.
Com might be
better,
heavier weighted for quarterback,
could be,
or than the even approach. Maybe running backs and wide receivers using all 6 evenly.
Yeah,
because it worked good this year. We were really good. But as a matter of fact, we're really good at every position this year. Yeah. We did not have any quarterbacks that we said were well worth investing in, because the strategy in one quarterback leagues was basically only take a quarterback if there's no acceptable running backs, wide receivers, or tight ends, or you already have your elite tight end.
Yeah.
That was my strategy this year. And Professor, it worked.
We got what we were focusing: Love, Baker.
Oh yeah. Yeah. When we look back at how we acquired players, the only guy that I would say that we were higher on than consensus that did not perform well before he got hurt was Dak Prescott.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you always wonder, was the guy playing all season with the injury that finally cost him? And will he bounce back? That's what you don't know, because you don't get enough data on these guys. You don't know, obviously the coach ain't letting you know. He doesn't want the competition to know if he's playing a guy that's a little hurt. But all the quarterbacks that we made a decision on, and here's what I'm even more proud of this year. Remember when I went through every player at the top of the draft and I gave the pros and cons for that player?
Yes.
My pros and cons were pretty right on the money.
We have that at the website.
Yeah.
That it's there.
And what I'm going to do in the offseason, professors, I'm going to go back through that.
Dennis, they have moved Chuba to IR now. So
that's
we have a slot. So
and
definitely
fabulous.
You and I probably need to be bouncing back and forth next 24 hours till tomorrow at 12. See what we need to forage and hoard. I think you've already thought about how you might play that. So I'm proud of that. I do love that aspect, for how we approach that. So
Yeah,
this is my team here, Dennis. So after we finish the dynasty, let's focus on this, and then we'll start the show, I think.
yeah, and the guy that I'm going to put in a bid for is Chris Brooks because I think he's the next man up.
I would
Um,
like to right now of the ones I saw, he looked like somebody you might want to go to battle with next year, and you could
yeah,
get him. I bet you for nothing, you know,
yeah, and we've got the
because
we've got the
everybody's
fab.
focused this year. You know, we're playing for next year now.
Yeah, we've got the fab money, so we'll blow it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I always approach this is
So
you've
you
got
don't
the
have
money to
to get
blow.
rid of the Green Bay right now if you don't want to.
Yeah, but I think I will
Okay.
to grab Blackshear,
Okay.
and
So
then I'll
you want,
grab Brooks for that extra space.
okay. Good.
And maybe what I'll do instead of grabbing Blackshears, I might grab another wide receiver depending on where we are
Right.
with the injury situation. But boy, Hubbard going to IR. Here's the thing, folks. Simple out doesn't work in FPPC Dynasty. You need the player to go on IR. And that killed us this year
Yes.
when they didn't put Cup on IR.
Or
We had,
CMC. Or
yeah,
did he go on our
CMC finally went on IR, but they kept him 2 weeks out
yeah.
until he finally went on IR. So that hurts you. And then in redraft, it doesn't matter. You have to make a decision. You have no reserve spots.
Yeah.
So you have to make a decision whether you want to cook that guy or hold him over.
Yeah.
And that can be a tough decision sometimes because sometimes guys look like they're coming back.
Okay.
But no, I'm glad to have Hubbard if he's going to be out.
Yeah.
Do it early so we
Yeah.
can get an extra
So
man on the roster.
so let's talk about my conundrum. This is one of my finals teams. I uh changed my team names to help me do
Yep.
bookkeeping. You
Yep.
know, so that way I just don't want to be confused. Because you know, FFPC, for whatever reason, even though they only pay at the top spot, they actually still score keep even if you're in the third versus fourth team.
Yes.
So that's kind of confusing. I think that's just a default of their software because they don't want to change it. Because in some situations, maybe some of these other formats, Empire format or some of these other formats, Dennis, that may make, you know, they may pay third. So I
Yeah.
think instead of them, a little bit lazy, FFPC, you know, I think we should, if I'm on the third and fourth, I don't need to see that score. I'm done for the season. You know, just show me my final play. I had to do it myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway, this is my finals, team three. I got seven. And fortunately, the only one I have Schubert, well, it's just the way it worked out. So I do have some fab left. Folks, in FFPC, you can't bid zero. So
You need a buck.
you need a buck or two. So, Dennis, fortunately, I just moved Josh Jacobs to the RB spot. Whew. So that helped, right? I mean, he's
Boy,
somebody
did you
we're
draft
all, yeah,
you
we're playing,
drafted great here, and
yeah,
then to pick up
Henry,
Thielen
yeah,
along the way was a
yeah,
great pick.
yeah. So Thielen, yeah. Well, Dennis, I was sold on on best ball.
Oh yeah,
I
you
was
were.
all
Yep.
I was just rubbing my whiskers against all that. Ready, Kittles. So it's pretty good. I mean, there's some. Addison is kind of hit or miss, but I'm hoping we have a hit this time. But I still have time. Tyler Bass, Miami versus Cleveland. I'm hoping I can get about 10 points out of them.
Yep.
Uh, you know. So anyway, I'm going golf over love. I'm not going to mess with Stafford.
No, I think
And
that's the right play. That's the right
well,
play, I think.
64% are playing love 61 or play, I mean, 61 love, 64 golf. So sometimes that's an interesting metric that I use just, I start looking at damps, but I like to see kind of what the public is thinking just to make sure, not that I follow the public, Dennis, but why is that happening? That's my question. Why are they rating golf over love? See, it helps me formulate the question. Doesn't help me, oh, I'm going to play regardless. No, 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 no. It's just, okay, that's what the public, why is that good or not good? Why am I going for or against that play? But at least it frames the argument, is another way to say that, Dennis. And
Yeah,
of
and I
course, the rest of them are in the 90s. So, except for Theo is 65. So, anyway, I do have.
and by the way,
Mhm.
golf right now is
Uh-huh.
my consensus QB6.
Mhm.
Love it consists at QB 11. So there's a significant difference
Mhm.
in that, and between the two, there's basically about 3 tiers difference right now. So there's 18 points between the two of them. That's a huge difference. I would not.
And just average is about 3 points, 2.5 points
Yeah,
per game.
and I think if anything, Love might be facing the tougher defense of
Yeah, and
situation.
if you
So
look overall, Dennis, if 19 is your number, in the last one, two, three, 4 games, he's been above 19.
yeah,
Week 12, he dropped below. Week 10, week 9. So right there, he was having some really choppy times. But boy, since, week 13, he's really come on. And Buffalo's not a crappy team.
no, no.
Chicago can be rough, as you saw
It,
Thursday night.
and Green Bay is a tough defense.
Yeah,
So
so I don't know if everything's coming together for him, which is fine. He needs to be peaking. You want to peak in the Super Bowl, but you definitely want to peak now, to get into that final show there and go on to the Super Bowl. So,
yeah, and once again, we're looking at an outdoor game, which he hasn't had too many of those this
well,
year.
Chicago was,
Chicago was, and he was good there. And Green Bay, the first Green Bay game was outside, and he was subpar in that game.
yep.
So those are the only 2 outdoor games he's had all year, Professor. So that's pretty incredible when you look at it that way.
Uh-huh.
But his home away splits have still been something. But I also noticed another thing with Goff is that later in the year, as that defense has struggled, we've seen him have to pick up the pace. So they are missing. They were last week. They were missing 5 guys on the defense that
So
started the year. So
Love, one, two, three out of the last 5 or 6 or
yeah,
7. So
yeah,
his com score would not be higher at all. Golf would be much better that way as well.
yeah. The only thing I would say about Love this week, and again, as you know from listening to me from the preseason to right now,
Yeah.
I can find the good and bad in every single player because if you can't look at a player,
Mhm.
even the best player in the league, and you can't say, what's the good or bad on this guy? If you can't do that, you're not looking at things logically. And with Love on the upside, I don't think Green Bay's going to have as much success running against Minnesota. So they might have to pass more. And if he's up to the task, it's an indoor game. So he's in his element and he might have a decent game versus Goff, who's outdoors. Now, there isn't going to be significant weather in San Francisco, I don't think. So I think we're looking at a situation where, you know, we escape, good conditions we get for him being outdoors. It's not going to be particularly windy. It's a night game, so even the diurnal difference to the wind dies down a little bit in the South Bay later in the evening. So there's all the good things pointing towards golf, and there's only one good thing pointing towards love. So I would definitely take the golf side
So
of that.
what do I do with Chuba? I just moved him out and I put Reed in just to grab him. But
So
I do have Samuel.
yeah, so Samuel gives you great upside potential. There's such a risk reward to that.
Well, the public says Samuel, and it's 14. Reed is 1169. So the public and the FFPC pros uh, all say I should play Samuel.
So
But
I'm gonna
yeah,
surprise you with who I like here.
who do you like? Stevenson?
Take a look at Ramondre Stevenson, because I've done this. I've done this exercise with Stevenson already this week, where I was looking to bench him.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
but except for the game where he left early against Arizona, and except for the game where they just didn't do anything against Miami,
He's been 12.
he's been a
13.
11, 12 point guy. And on a few weeks, he's blown up for a good score. That Jets defense was good, and he blew up for a nice number against them. The first game against Miami, again, that defense good. He blew up for a nice number. It's as that New England offense goes, but even in a bad offensive output week, he still got you 11. He still got you 13 the
So
last
what
two,
I'm
or
hearing
13 the
is
last 2 weeks.
you would weight him as a safer pick than
Yes.
Samuel or
Yes.
Debo.
Yeah. Debo is going to be, again, one of those guys that he could give you as low as 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Because Garendo is back.
Well,
Okay.
here's my opponent, and 135, me 155 right now.
Ooh, that's nice.
And I've got Henry did well, and he
Yes.
had Collins with and Roma Dunze.
Oh, that's
So
beautiful.
he has one less player to play, one less bullet. So I'm liking that. I get that money, Dennis, and I'm liking my chances here.
So here's the strategy, and I rarely apply this, but I do in the finals. Okay.
Yeah.
And especially when you already have players that have played.
Mhm.
So going into this week, like at the very beginning of the week, I might have made a different decision on Debo
Mhm.
than I have come to that conclusion late in the week. So you're already up 13 points,
Yes.
and you're plus one player. So
Yes.
you're plus 13 points plus one player. I just want to avoid having a Roma Dunze type game. I don't want to give back
My
a player.
advantage. Yeah.
Okay. And if you get 8 to 12 points from your worst player, it's going to be hard for him to catch up because he's already down a player. And that's the way I would go with that, because with running backs, they're a little bit more flaky with their performance, even in PPR, because you can have a great wide receiver that gets 5 to 7 targets and gets 1 or 2 catches for very little yardage, versus a running back like Stevenson. Look at how many times he's touched the ball.
Yeah.
He's rarely is under 10 touches and can catch the ball out of the backfield. So that gives you a chance at, an instant PPR point. that's kind of how I would play this because both Reed and Debo Samuel probably have better upside right now. But Green Bay could struggle this week. And Garendo being back, Debo could get fewer touches. So that's kind of how I would equate this. Plus, San Francisco's playing for nothing. Yeah, New England's playing for nothing but pride right now. But a young team playing for pride isn't a bad thing to have right now.
So I'm looking at my options because I can like get rid of Chuber because he's.
Oh boy, look at these guys that got dropped in your league. Xavier Worthy and McMillan both getting dropped, and they have been fantasy football playoff studs.
They dropped in week 11, Dennis.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I'd
Don't.
love to look back and see if those teams that dropped those guys, wouldn't it be hilarious if the same guy dropped both
Oh
and
wow.
crashed and burned in the playoffs? But that's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. So my best shot, Zacchaeus. In other words, if I go out and try to grab somebody, which I might just to grab, I have him. Uh, Chiggy is out there, Dennis.
Boy,
Yeah,
that's
that's
interesting.
intriguing, isn't it?
Good
I think
matchup.
I'm definitely. I think I'm gonna put him, and I may
Let's take
want
a
to
look at
just.
the running. Let's take a look at the running backs that are available. I'm
I
curious.
think you'll see it's Brooks and Mims, and Brashear may be in there as well.
Yeah, that's nothing to
Nothing
worth.
is, in
Yeah,
other
I'm not
words,
looking
would
at
I
that.
play Mims over Stevenson?
No,
No. Or
no,
Brooks?
no,
No.
no.
If this was a streaming week and I have nothing else to play, yeah, I think I'd play Brooks.
Yeah, I think I would grab Chiggy and have that extra bullet to decide between because here's the thing.
Yeah.
Between now and Sunday, it's very possible that you could lose somebody else.
And
Like
he's got,
it's
by the way, he's got $32. I have 138.
38. So you
So
can
if I
bid
put
33 and lock him
33
in. Yep.
and I should grab,
He's your player. Yep.
he's my player, right?
Yep.
So
You're
now
guaranteed to have him.
I
Now, if something happens to anybody,
well,
you're set.
if Kittle were to, slip in the shower tomorrow morning, then I've got Chicky to get 13 points.
Yeah, and I think you're in good shape here. Who else do you have on the roster? Do you have anybody as a Monday night miracle guy? So you do have Debo.
Debo.
So here's the thing. If you do decide to play Chiggy,
Uh-huh.
you got to put Kittle in that flex spot, and
I
then
can.
you're all set. So
Yeah.
if you decide to play Chiggy ahead of
Just
Stevenson, which I don't think is a bad decision either.
no, I'm intrigued by that decision.
Yeah, then you put him in tight end, and then you are protected in
Yes.
case something weird happens in Monday night warmups. So,
Yeah, I
and
could
also,
throw, in other words, if Kittle got hurt, I throw in Debo.
yeah, yeah, you or if Monra, St. Brown
Got
comes up
hurt.
lame, you've got
I got can
you've already
Thielen.
started
No,
Thielen up in the wide
yeah, I
receiver
could
slot.
flip it.
So yeah,
Yeah, I could flip it. Yeah, FFPC allows me to move Thielen
after the fact,
after the
yeah.
fact, which is great. Love that. So FFPC does do some things right. And I'm just wondering, Dennis, and since you play on there, maybe you and I should write the head of FFPC an argument letter about some rule changes we would love for them to some things that I would love to see would be being able to call up your ROI for each year, just so you can track your metrics. Just I would also love to see my positional success. Say
Ooh,
average
yes.
points
Yeah.
scored,
Yeah.
you know, something like that.
How did you do versus the rest of the FPPC
Yeah,
players? Were you
something.
better at quarterback? Were you
Some
better at yeah.
more kind of historical metrics that I would love to see. Maybe we'll put together something, and once we have a template, we can send it to them every year to bug them. We need to get us maybe our icon on a letterhead. I can print that. Make it look like we know what we're doing. You know. So anyway, that'd be something for the off season, folks. I mean, you never know. I mean, think rules. I mean, FFPC has changed things since I played way back about 10 years ago. I started. Things have changed a little bit. With 17 games, things have changed.
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay, I'm liking the Chiggy here.
Yeah,
And
let's look at what he's done over the last 5 games. I'm curious because this is in a tight
I'm
end premium
surprised to
situation.
see him.
Yeah,
Dennis, are you surprised?
I'm very surprised to see that he hadn't been on a team and cut.
So, last two games, look at those targets with 10 and 11. I mean, everybody is on him, Dennis. Everybody.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The fact that he is like his worst games have still been 5 or more here
Yes.
down the stretch. That shows that he is getting consistently used. And again, this is a tight end premium, so when you get one of those big games like he had where he had 8 catches, 9 catches, I mean, that's insane. And that's the switch to Mason Rudolph.
Yes.
So that's a sign that you got a guy who Rudolph has a connection with instantly. I
Yes.
love seeing those comparisons of data because before Rudolph,
Yeah,
he was pretty ordinary.
yeah, he was.
And since the switch to Rudolph here, because if you look at Chicky's games with Rudolph, he's the first set of games he was 9-1-6, and then the last two he's been 13 and 19.
Yeah.
And I don't see any big differences on who was playing at that time.
Yeah.
So that tells me that you're probably your worst case with Chiggy this weekend is getting about 7 points in a PPR premium because he's getting a lot of looks. And that's what I like about it. I'm not chasing the points.
No.
I'm chasing the
The volume.
targets.
And the
Look
volume.
at that volume. And here's the thing 23 and 17 without finding the end zone.
Imagine he gets in the end zone this week
Woo! Yeah,
against Jacksonville.
Yeah, I do like that Chiggy play there because you got Pollard Gimpy.
Yeah.
Spears has been good, but they don't have that 1-2 punch to totally end the game. So I think Rudolph's going to get, he's starting again, and he seems to like Chiggy. The guy that's dropped off the radar with the addition of Mason Rudolph is the Hoosier hyphen.
Yeah.
Nick Westbrook Akine has dropped off to 229 the last 3 weeks. So it's not been pretty with the replacement of Will Levis for him. But the benefit has been there for Chiggy, and for Calvin Ridley has been doing better with Rudolph at quarterback. So
Well, this is
that's
good.
very interesting.
This I'm glad we actually took it through here because
We
I
wouldn't have
have
found Chiggy.
no. Well, I would have, but it'd
You would
been later
eventually,
this
yeah.
evening. Yeah,
Yeah.
because when we watch family baking shows Saturdays, I get my iPad and while they're doing crepe Suzette or whatever the hell they're doing, on the TV, I'm working my iPad.
So
So
when the buns turn a little stodgy,
Yeah,
You
soggy bottoms and
you
all.
got stodgy. It's
Yeah,
just undercooked.
yeah,
Undercooked.
yeah. We watch the British Baking Show all the time. We
That's
love
a
that.
favorite. That's our
Paul
favorite.
Hollywood, we love that stuff.
Paul
I,
Hollywood and Prue together
oh
are
yeah, Paul,
hilarious, and that comic, the weird looking dude that's the comic,
he plays in movies too over
he's
there.
hilarious.
Yeah,
He's
he's a
hilarious.
character.
Yeah.
He's but he's in that tradition of those characters like that. I
Yes.
mean, in the
Yes.
1960s, he would have been a member of Monty
Oh,
Python.
you would have Monty Python all the way. Yeah.
Yeah, he
He
would
would.
have been one of their league mates there.
Yeah.
Okay, Dennis, I think I feel pretty good about that exercise. I hope the few people that are actually listening to us now are not pissed off at us. Maybe they'll forget and they'll come back next year on off season. I don't know.
Well, we made some people some money this year, and we can
I hope
speak of
so.
that because we hear regularly from one guy who said he's having the best fantasy football year he's ever
Yeah,
had.
yeah. Shout out to
So,
John. Yeah,
yep,
yeah.
John, as you're listening again, I hope you
Oh
have
yeah,
great
he's
success in your
hardcore.
finals.
Yeah. Hope he has a good new year. And John, stick with us. I look, Dennis and I are not the same formula that the rest of the folks. I listen, and no offense to anybody, but what I hear a lot of is they are telling you what already happened and use that as a way to pick. And Dennis and I are trying to do, I mean, I understand you need to have that, but there needs to be something more. And I don't hear the something more. Dennis and I use data, consistency, better than zeros. Dennis, if we ever get a Society of Fantasy Football Informatics, I will argue that should be one of the definitions that needs to be approved by that committee there. That was such a great way to approach it. And, I have my game has gotten better, uh, but I feel like this year, since we didn't, uh, we don't know the complete answers, I feel like there's more that we're going to do in the next
Oh
few
yeah.
years. So I'm optimistic long term that it's going to get better for us. And this year, and kind of segueing, probably starting the show, but this year with all the injuries, Dennis,
Oh,
I
it's been
mean, do
crazy.
you remember week 17 having this much things endowed, and you're up to the last minute trying to figure, and this dribble of Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday,
Oh,
Sunday, Monday.
that's rough because if everybody's playing on the same day,
Yeah.
it's a much easier decision. When you have to factor in, oh my goodness, I had one league professor where we start 12 players every week. Okay. It's a reasonably, got a healthy number of flex positions and a super flex. We have 12 starters every week. Out of my 12 starters to start the week,
Yeah.
I had 8 guys listed as questionable or
Nice.
worse.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at that, you get anybody with a pulse
Yeah.
that's playing on Wednesday and Thursday, suddenly my game plan usually is okay, if I have one or two questionable guys or
Yeah.
guys that are missing, I don't worry about
Yeah.
speeding up my play.
Right.
But when I have 8 guys that are questionable or doubtful or out already of
Mhm.
of what would have been my 12 starters, if I got a guy healthy on Wednesday who's not in a horrible situation,
Yeah.
I had a couple of leagues where I'll be honest, Xavier Worthy might not have been in my starting lineup.
Yeah.
the last 2 weeks, I can honestly say, because he played Saturday the week before.
Yeah.
But because he was starting early in the week, he was perfectly healthy. He was likely to get some volume. I put him ahead of other guys. I played him and put myself in one league, Professor, to have the decision of sitting out either CeeDee Lamb, Higgins, or Drake London. I look brilliant now, don't I?
Yeah.
At the
Good.
time, it was a desperation play of saying, I got Lamb, Higgins, and London all questionable right now.
You almost
Now,
think with that many, one is not going to play.
one's not going to play. Yeah, and my other guy was Garrett Wilson, so I'm like, I don't like that play either.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that by playing Worthy, it frees me up. If the other guys are all healthy, they're all in the starting lineup, and I sit Wilson.
But the differential with Worthy versus some of those guys at top, I don't think you lost a lot. Let's say,
No,
what did Worthy get you?
well, Worthy got me a good point total this week.
Yeah.
He ended up having another good game. I mean, he's been sort of the superstar here. The
But
last 3 weeks,
what was the
19, 20, and 22. So he had 22 this week.
yeah, so you're thinking at best in the 20s, at worst 10.
I figured he hasn't had a game under 9
Okay, so I'm
since week
thinking
10.
Yeah.
Since week 10. So
So
I
you
look at
figure you got a guaranteed 10 versus those other three, and you're thinking, that's the gamble, I think in
yes.
your head.
Yeah. So getting rewarded by 20 and 22 the last 2 weeks was like, all right, I'll take the win,
Yeah.
but it was a safety play. I was playing for 10 points.
Right.
And that's the difference between my rationale of how to play fantasy football and others.
Yeah.
I draft for upside. Okay. I want guys that have great upside in my weekly values, but I also want them to be consistent upside. And that's what the MVP index shows. But when it comes to setting my weekly lineup,
Yeah.
I play a lot of times for safety. I
Yeah.
play for that security of 10 to 15 points. Give me
Yeah.
10 to 15. If everybody on my squad scores 10 to 15
Yeah.
at running back and wide receiver, I'm going to win that more often than not. And somebody's likely to have a big week out of those guys.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I play a little more
And
safe.
it hits me that people say, well, why do y'all make MVP or column? I think it's a shorthand
Yes.
for us to, when we're weighing lots of variables, that once you create an index here, that you can get deeper, right? You can actually go look week by week, and we do sometimes, but to begin your analysis, we have a starting point versus what I hear on there is depending on the person and the show and their bias, they're pulling out targets, snaps, snap percentage, air yards, uh, the red
EPA.
zone,
Don't forget EPA.
EPA. And so I hear all these, and all they're doing is giving me the raw number. Versus if they had a air yards index and they said, we have, from 0 to 100 index of air yards, and we found if you can hit 80 or above, those players tend to do this. 60 to 80 tends to do that. Imagine how quicker you could get down to the meat of the question if you had something like an index. And maybe Dennis and I are shooting for multiple, kind of a super index. right? Of our 6 variables, maybe we throw a few out this year. I don't know. And maybe we weigh them different by position. We have an opportunity to build. And now, once we use that, we already kind of can visualize what the frame is of the arguments versus what I hear on the radio, Dennis. If somebody says, "Oh, they have, you know, air yards of 60," I, I don't know what that means, really. Versus
Yeah.
another player has 40. Is that bad? In other words, maybe 60 and 40 should be in the same level or tier. So to me, it's like the low of that tier and the high of that tier, but it's still in that tier. You break yours down by tiers.
Yes.
And so that kind of starts the argument. And what I hear they don't do that. They have an opinion. I like Chuba Hubbard this week because his air yards were 80 last 2 games. I, that doesn't tell me what does that mean compared to the league, compared to historical metrics, compared to does that relate to targets or volume? I'm left with like, okay, I guess that's good. And then you either take what they said or you don't. And if you don't have time, I can see people just, well, he said 8 yards with 80. 80 sounds high, so I'll play that. And then it doesn't work. Okay. Then what are they doing next week? Do they go and listen to somebody? Well, the red zone opportunity is 40. 40 doesn't sound good. I better not play that. And they get 2 touchdowns and then they're mad. I mean, I can see where players can get jostled between some of these ideas and things that people, because they're not fleshed out. And I think maybe our problem, Dennis, is we know you can't have a quick answer. And so we tend to talk and pontificate because that's how forecasting is. You can't just sit there.
Yes.
It's not like you go to your swimming pool and stick the little chlorine thing. Oh, yep, got plenty of chlorine. I'm done. You know, it that's what we're going for. And it's like in horse racing, when buyer numbers came along, that begins and saves you a lot of time. When they say, yeah, their lowest buyer number in the last 5 routes has been 70, that tells you something. Okay.
Yes.
And, buyers, when they're over 110 or so, we're talking stakes level.
Yes.
There is some understanding of that index or that number and what does it mean. And I haven't, and I don't have time because I'm developing my own, is, some of these metrics, Dennis.
Yeah. And to me, metrics are great when they're used right. Okay. And, I'm not going to go ahead and say, okay, DVOA or EPA or air yards or any of these other things that get thrown out. I'm not going to say they're bad. Okay. I'm just going to say they don't explain what we need to explain in fantasy football. All that matters in fantasy football is did he score points or didn't he? Okay. The volume tells me he had a chance to score points. The snap percentage tells me he was on the field, so he had a chance to get that volume. Okay, so that's why I like snap percentage, targets. Now, the efficiency numbers that you've put together, I love that because that tells me, okay,
What's the team level?
That tells me different levels of performance.
And it's scaled to the league that
Yes.
week or
Yes.
those 3 games.
Yes. So, and here's the thing is I'm not going to attack somebody else's process. Okay. But have a process and explain it well. So this week, somebody ripped one of the big names on SiriusXM for giving him bad advice to start Cortland Sutton over Terry McLaurin. So using my process, I would have started McLaurin over Cortland Sutton. But I didn't say that, first off. What I looked at was the results. And I said both had identical numbers of targets.
Yep.
Both had identical numbers of catches. There was a 10-yard difference in yards that went to Cortland Sutton, but McLaurin got in the end zone. So obviously McLaurin scored more points than Cortland Sutton. But I said this wasn't bad advice because the players were almost identical with the exception of the touchdowns. So this was not malpractice advice.
Yeah.
But then I turned around and I said, had you asked me that based on points scored over this season and the last two seasons combined, I would have told you to start Terry McLaurin, and here's why. Terry McLaurin was ranked 13th using my consensus data. Sutton was 26th. That's not even close. They had a sizable difference, over 50 points in consensus points. That's huge. That's a huge advantage to McLaurin. I would have started McLaurin, but I'm not telling you this analyst was wrong, because the system that he used, whatever it is, arrived at almost identical conclusions for these two players. The only difference was the touchdowns. So this is the different way that a scientist looks at data versus the average Joe. Hey, I scored less, you suck. No, let's look at what happened. Let's look at how they scored less. Now, I will say this. Terry McLaurin is scoring a heck of a lot more touchdowns this year than Cortland Sutton. So this year, he is the much more likely player to get in the end zone. That Washington offense is much more likely to score touchdowns because they're scoring at a higher rate than Denver. But Denver's been incredibly efficient lately. But at the end of the day, your metrics need to equate to something that's going on in the real world of fantasy football. My weekly values, and I called it that because it was the first statistical tool that I came up with, and I didn't want to use Big Ten because I thought I was going to get sued by the Big Ten Conference. I'm going to change the name of that because I have more than one weekly value metric now, and it's getting very confusing. That's my upside values. My upside index is what I'm going to call it going forward, because what that number that I've called weekly values or Big Ten in the past, what it does is shows me the best that a player can do. That's important in fantasy football. I want to know that Lamar Jackson has a chance to score 10 more points on his best weeks than Jaden Daniels. That's huge. That's the best in the league right now. And that's based on 2 years plus this season being weighted in. So that's huge. That's, anything over 35 at quarterback is solid. When you're over 40, that's amazing. When you're 45, the only other player that's close to that is Josh Allen at 44. Then it drops down to Burrow at 40. But that's only one way of looking at fantasy football data. My MVP index is upside potential on steroids, or consistency on steroids. It looks at the great games that a player can have where he's absolutely won your week for you. He's looking at the above median games where he's just kept you in the battle. And then I'm looking at the really bad, horrible games where it doesn't matter what the rest of your team did. Your quarterback was so bad, he probably cost you the win all on his own. And when you look at those data together, that comes up with this thing that I call the MVP score. Over 100 is fabulous. Over 120 is in an insane level. 80 or better, I'm starting that guy most weeks, unless I got, players above him. My best index just looks at those first two things that a player can do. Did he help you win? Did he keep you in the match? I don't care about the bad games because this is developed for best ball, and it removes injuries. During the year, I look at who had the most number of times they showed up on your best ball scoring sheet. And so I look at injuries. I factor in injuries with that one index. And then MVP for this year alone is just what it says. It's looking at just the best games from this year versus MVP that looks at that bigger patch of data. And when I combine all four of those, I think it brings out the best in all of those metrics. Like if a player is in the top 5 or 6 in each one of those categories, he's probably going to be the top guy. And then what I did this year that goes a little bit against the science, but I'll explain the logic, is I didn't care what the difference was between the various levels. So in other words, I didn't equate this to 100% and weight each one. If you were first and your weighted difference was 10 versus first and your weighted difference to second place was, 95, it was less of a difference. I didn't care. And the reason I didn't care is because I don't know which one of these might be bad data to look at. So by not weighting them, I don't artificially jack up one over the other just because there's a huge difference in the data between one to another. So by doing that, I minimized the impact of any one of these four to destroy the consensus. Is it perfect? Hell no. Do I know that it works better at a certain position than others? No. We have 1 year of data. But what I'll tell you of watching this is when I see the consensus and I see a big spread between the players, that is defined when not to look at the defensive matchups too closely. Because if I've got a guy who's got a consensus score that is 30 points more than the other guy, I don't care what the matchups are. That guy has shown me that he's outperformed the other guy over a course of a larger data set. So unless he's only played good teams or bad, unless those guys are skewed that much, the schedule tends to even itself out over time. So by using large enough data sets to power the consensus, I remove that chance of, well, it's only 3 games, so maybe he played 3 really good teams or 3 really bad teams. But that's you whenever you're testing something scientifically, you have to have a thesis and a theory. You set it out there, and then you try to break it. You try to defeat it. And if you can't defeat the data, if you can't show that it's garbage, then you might have something. I don't look at the data to give me an answer that this is great. I'm trying to beat it, because if I beat the data, if the data is not performing well, then I know it's time to switch. Versus having good success with it is great. It makes you feel good, but testing it the other way in science, I think, is very important.
Yeah, it's falsification.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a guy named Karl Popper. If anybody wants to read his epistemology of science, So everything stands if you can't prove it false. And so people say, well, what about religion? Well, that's why science can't, there, you can't set up any experiments to prove anything in religion false, right? You can't put it in a room and ask question, okay, here's a branch, make it burn or whatever, or turn this water into wine. It can't be tested. So you can't prove it false. So it's just not, science cannot approach that. But science can approach fantasy football. We can find out what is not working. And so if we find something that we can't falsify, then we need to stick to it and figure out another way. Keep working around until we can defeat it, right? It's like the undefeatable locks, right? Or something like that, or security. I mean, that's why they'll pay these hackers money to try to beat their system because sometimes when you're too close to it, you can't see. So you get some of these white hat hackers, you hire them if you're a company, come in and beat our system. If they find a way in, then you pay them their money and you change it. And that's what, is going on. So in fantasy, Dennis and I are trying to defeat some of our ideas, and consistency is one. And we really haven't figured out a way to falsify consistency. I mean, people say, oh, it's all luck. Right now, I would say consistency holds until we can prove it false
It,
over a large sample over
yes.
time, Dennis, not
It,
a week or a player, right?
it's how you grade consistency that matters. If I say fantasy football data is inconsistent, so therefore consistency doesn't matter. Yes, fantasy football data is inconsistent. A guy could score 45 points one week, five,
It
then
has
25, then
variation.
30. It has variation. But if I grade players versus certain point total
Yes.
and I compare those players, that's a healthier way to look at
That stands.
consistency. And that has not
That's
been
what
defeated.
stands right now.
And,
So,
and I think we are so contrary to what the majority of people in fantasy football do because they look for stuff that just goes ahead and gives them a positive feedback on their idea.
well, Dennis, we grew up at horse racing and it was called red boarding. Those tip sheets every day you walk in. I had 10 winners last week, yesterday. And they'll circle them and all this. And after a while you figure out, well, if the damn tip sheet's that good, why is the guy selling the tip sheet? Why not they making their own plays? That kind of thing. I mean, you learn pretty quick a lot of lessons, Dennis. The horse, I paid nice amount of money for my education at the horses. I
Oh,
have
yeah.
paid over the years. Some years I've done pretty good. I've had to file the W-2Gs, and some
Oh,
years I
yeah.
hadn't. And by the way, Trump, if you would make all gambling losses uh, apply to our taxes, not just what we won. They won't do that, but if they ever did, oh boy, would that be fun.
Yeah, they need to stop. They need to stop taxing on what you make and start coming up with a tax on what you consume in
Yeah,
life. And that would be a
I
lot
like that.
smarter way of doing things.
We
But no,
probably need to start the show, Dennis. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
let's
You and
jump right
I,
in.
we're spiraling. When we start talking about horses too much, we're horsing around. It's probably time to get back to fantasy football.
That sounds like a good idea, Professor. So I'll fire things up and here we go. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the 200th 200 edition of the Science of Fantasy Football. Yes, they said we'd be canceled quicker than a comedy featuring that guy from MASH. That would never seemed to last more than 1 or 2 years after he left MASH. What was that guy's name? The guy that played the first commander, the first colonel on that show. But anyway, folks, 200 times we have stepped up to the plate to give fantasy football advice using the science of fantasy football. Why does it work? Well, you get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use a scientific method that's just a smarter way to use statistics, and that is guaranteed to give you better success when it comes to fantasy football. And joining me as he does each and every week, he is the fantasy professor. He's a real professor, folks. I guess we have to say real professor emeritus now.
We're working on that.
It's John Bush. John, 200 episodes. That's a huge milestone, and it's all your fault. You told me 200 episodes ago, hey, you want to do a podcast with me back in the old fake pigskin days, and we have lasted longer than that website did.
Yeah, the last incarnation we did there. It's towards the end, I felt like a fried pork skin, Dennis. Kind of crackly and airy, and there wasn't much left of my soul. They had sucked everything dry. But now, when we put it right, move on the scientific process, trying to falsify this data, trying to see what stands, it has been a pleasure to be with you. It's fun. It's just extra fun. And to me, I know it's our 200th, but I'm looking forward to off season.
Oh yeah.
And so we got so much to do and so little time that on the podcast about June, I will be lamenting that we don't have another 3 or 4 months of data. From last year. I wish the seasons would last longer or whatnot, but then I don't know if the players could survive. Week 17, Chuba Hubbard just went on IR. This is Saturday morning.
Ouch.
And so Dennis and I on the pre-show, and that's on the video side of this. This is the audio side. We went through, and Dennis may have found me an escape route. Involves a tight end, since it's tight end premium, Chiggy. And I may have him. If my waivers work, I should have him as a possibility. And so I flipped Schubert for Josh Jacobs from my flex. Thank goodness I had Henry and Josh Jacobs there. And I have Ramondre Stevenson in the background, Debo. I have, who's the other one? I'm going to have Chiggy and Reed. So I have all that for my last flex spot. So I have lots to chew on tonight during our family baking show night, Dennis. So, but this week, these last couple weeks, the injuries have been racking up, and just maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems like there's a lot going on this week.
Well, it seems like there's more injuries all season this year, losing key players. But guess what, folks? We're going to be looking at the data, and we're going to be analyzing, did we see more injuries? And you say, well, why do that? Why waste time doing that? Well, it's not a waste of time, because what if we are seeing more injuries since they've gone to a 17-week season or 17-game season versus a 16-game season? What happens if they expand another game to 18 and add another bye week? What if we're looking at a 20-week season with 2 buys for
Oh my
teams
God.
in the future. We have to adjust to whatever the NFL is adjusting to. And so, not having that research, not knowing where that data is and what it's saying, doesn't give you a baseline for understanding the future. So, it's very important, in my opinion, that we find the baselines and understand where we are going with this data so we know how to react to this in the future. But that's going to be all part of the data studies during the off season of many that we will be working on. But right now, it does appear. I mean, losing C.D. Lamb for the finals,
Mm.
losing Chuba Hubbard, who's been a solid RB2 upside RB2 guy, like the top end of the RB2s. Those are just two of the many guys fallen by the wayside. We won't have Kamara. We won't have Carr this week. I mean, it is getting lean on some of these rosters, but using that better than zero strategy, Professor, you kind of build your team for those worst cases. The only thing I've already started doing some studies of how injuries have impacted my teams. And the better than zero basically says, hey, if you're starting only 2 wide receivers, you're pretty much done after 4, maybe 5. That's as many as you want. But we are seeing more injuries to wide receivers. Is that a new trend? Is that just a fluke this season? Is it a trend? Can we quantify that? Can we see if it's more? Because if it is more, maybe we have to consider adding a 5th or 6th wide receiver to our lineups. We still don't want to be, wide receiver heavy if we can avoid it. We want to be more running back heavy, especially when it comes with the upside guys. If a WR2 on a particular team goes down, that doesn't mean the WR3 is instantly startable in fantasy football. But if the RB1 goes down, the RB2 is certainly a guy you want in that lineup. So with the right teams. But injuries, and really looking at the injuries in an interesting way is going to be it. And I have a theory, Professor, of why we're seeing so many missed games this year, in addition to just injuries. I think some of these short weeks, I think playing every day of the week is probably a bad idea. And especially for the fantasy football finals, trying to have a final week where you had games starting Wednesday, 3 games Wednesday, 1 game, or 2 games Wednesday, 1 game on Thursday, 3 on Saturday before you get to the Sunday slate, and then having Monday Night Football. That's just nuts to try to manage all of that when it isn't like that every single week of the year.
It's tough. You've got to be thoughtful. I think if you have any weaknesses, and if you made the finals, there's good and bad. You only have to compete against fewer opponents, but your roster needs to be a little bit robust, Dennis. This is not the week to have, 3 WR1s and then the rest WR4s or worse.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
tough. And, you got some issues. If you had Lamb, are you going with Cooks? Are you going with Tolbert? Are what's going on? I mean, and Dennis and I on the pre show, I start off talking about Hubbard, and I'm saying, and people talk about blocking your opponent. And I'm saying, do I want to block Bagshear or Boone? Or would I invite my opponent to grab them? And I've decided I think I'll let them grab them. Maybe it's like a poison pill. Maybe that hurts them by grabbing them. So I'm going elsewhere in that one league. I'm going to Chiggy, and I think he will be an interesting possibility. We broke that down, showing Mason Rudolph loves the targets, and Chiggy caught almost all his targets last year, 10 and 11. and then he got 9 and 8, so 17 out of 21 the last 2 weeks. Oh my God! And we get paid 1.5 per catch with tight ends, so we get a little sweetening to a heavily used tight end on top of all that in a tight end premium. So it was all double good. It's like getting a Sunday and you get two cherries on top. And that's what I felt like I found. Dennis kind of helped me find that. So thanks, Dennis. And folks, if you don't have somebody to bounce your team stuff, I think that would be a strategy for next year, is try to find somebody as nutty as you are that wants to live this and eat and breathe this. And I think if you approach it in a logical, scientific way, I think that is got to help you in next year's drafts, Dennis. I think you and I, it's like, what was it? Back there was a cartoon, the League of Super Friends, and they had the two that would touch their hands together and Wonder Twins activate. And Dennis and I, even though we are Mutt and Jeff in appearance, definitely lots of Mutt and Jeff ishness, but we married up with our good wives. But Dennis and I, when we do the Wonder Twins activate, we become something, big as Godzilla. We're ready to crush our opponents, and our atomic breath is strong, Dennis. We're strong.
Yeah, here's the thing that I've really learned is if you have somebody who is really good at being the counterpoint to your point when you discuss players, it's not like 1+1 = 2 in fantasy football. It's like 1+1 = 4 when you get two people who can think through the data, because you find things that the other might have missed. You point out strategies, you point out data that the other person might have missed. And we have seen, and here's the thing. So it's been a long journey since I realized that year-end points and even points per game didn't matter in fantasy football. I used to believe that points per game mattered, less so year-end points. Okay, I was always kind of skeptical because I always thought, year-end totals mattered in rotisserie baseball. I didn't get to substitute a guy, so whoever I drafted, that's how many home runs I got every week, and you added them all up. You didn't do matchups, you didn't do anything like that. We're playing head to head in fantasy football. So every week you have a matchup. And it does matter what happens every week. It doesn't matter in the championship if player A has had 10 more touchdowns on the season than player B, or 10 more fantasy points, or even 5 more points per game. Doesn't matter. What's he likely to do this week? That's all that matters in fantasy football. It's a weekly scoring game. So weekly values and weekly value tools are all that matter. Ever since I came to that realization, this will be my 15th winning season in a row. And I grade winning by, did I win more money than I put in the pot? I mean, it's very simple. And this is likely to be the 15th straight year. And I don't really see a scenario in which it can't, because all the leagues we cash second and third place money as well as first. Only in FPPC does winner take all. And in those leagues, I know I've got at least one league that I'm going to probably win. Could win 2 out of my 5 redraft leagues, and that would be a nice profit. And I think our dynasty team will cash as well. But the key is, did you have a return on investment? And if you say no, but you still had fun and you're gambling within your means, then keep doing it. But if you want to get better, if you want to win consistently, you have to understand how the game is played. We understand how the game is played better than most, Professor, but we're still not where we need to be. But over the last 200 episodes of this show, we have helped each other improve our knowledge of data. We have had very little duplication of effort. We look at the data in different ways, in different lenses, if you will, but they all complement each other quite well. And it's made us both better fantasy football players. And I guarantee that if you come along with this ride for us, you will become a better fantasy football player if you are willing to learn. But you have to learn the scientific method. You have to learn how to stop chasing points and to start chasing upside consistency, to start chasing volume, to start chasing efficiency. So what the professor and I have learned is if a team is getting better, they don't simply quickly fall apart. It's just like a horse winding into form in horse racing. They get better, they get better, they get better, they peak for a while, and then they might fall off. Or maybe they then, after peaking for a while, they improve and improve and improve till they find a new plateau. But they certainly don't improve, and then go to the toilet and stay there. But a player can if he gets hurt. But we have learned how to take that top-down approach to this game and then to dissect it on the player level. And I think that accompanying styles of data analysis has moved us quite far along in fantasy football here in the last 200 episodes.
We will never, ever be able to beat football variation, though, Dennis. The best we can do, and this is from several books I've read, Black Swan, if you ever get a chance, what a great book. The best I think we can do is make black swans gray, right?
Yes.
So that's, I think, our better than zero. I call it ours, but it's yours, but it's ours.
It's ours.
Yeah, it's our metrics. I think it is our solution that we're working on to make the black swans at least gray versus just sitting there ignoring it. And then all of a sudden it happens and like, well, where did that come from? We don't know where it's coming from, but there's going to be some surprises today, Saturday, Sunday, and it's going to really swing some championships. I don't know what those are. Best I can do is prepare myself to hopefully be on the right side of the surprise, not the wrong side. And that's what Dennis and I are really trying to do is find a way to mitigate as much of the unknown unknowns as possible, Dennis. And I think I don't hear a lot of that discussion. They, on the radio, they'll say, well, just play my higher player. And if the players are 15th and 16th, really? You're telling me that there's so much greater, that there's a tier difference between 15 and 16? Maybe there is, but I bet more likely they're in the same kind of general area. And there probably needs to be other ways to tease that out. And I don't think it's as cut and dry. I understand it's simple. If, hey, I've got 5 minutes to set my lineups for this week. I want to do it, Wednesday at 5 o'clock, and I don't want to worry about it until Tuesday when I find out if I won. Folks, I'm chewing on every decision. This week, I've been chewing every night thinking about what comes on. So last night, thinking about Saturday games. Tonight, it'll be the Sunday games, and Sunday night, it'll be probably the Monday game. So, anyway, just trying to mitigate uh, the unknown, Dennis, is what we're really, I think, trying to do.
And in all of TV history, Professor, only about 35 shows have made it to 200 episodes.
Ooh.
So we're pretty excited about making our 200th episode of the Science of Fantasy Football. We got a ways to go. Gunsmoke at 6:35
Yeah,
is our mark to beat. We got to
yeah,
both hope we stay alive long enough to do that. But it's been a pleasure working with you
it has been.
for 199 previous episodes. And now here we are on episode number 200. We talked about the injuries. We know that's going to be a problem. Why don't we break down some data? That's what we are known for. So, on the video portion of this show, the professor is going to go over this data, but you can head over to scienceoffantasyfootball.com and take a look at this before you set your lineups for this weekend. So, Professor, take us through some of your data here for week 17.
Okay, so I have this week's power rankings, Dennis. Detroit, number one. New Orleans, number 32.
Ooh,
Yeah.
ouch.
Yeah. So it's Baltimore now. I know some of these games are already played. This is my process. Minnesota, number 3. Vegas, Dennis, number 4. How about that? Miami's up
Wow.
here. Buffalo, Cincinnati, Philly. Even without Hurts, I think there's a possibility that Philly, notice I haven't assigned variation, right? I could do that. And some of my metrics, I do look at the uncertainty levels, but this is just looking at the levels. The bottom side, New Orleans, worse. Cleveland, Dallas, boy, word about Dallas. The Giants, word about them. And, who's playing the Giants? Is that Indy? Is that one of,
Yes.
yeah, so
Yes.
that's why we
Yeah.
were playing
Whew.
that defense.
Love that defense.
Yeah, so we're playing because I think going up against the Giants is going to be, maybe we get a pick six in there. I don't know. Last week I did pretty good. Had Cincinnati, had Atlanta, had Green Bay, so I wasn't displeased. I I haven't graded my week by week, Dennis. See, my dog's grading me. He gives me 2 barks for my defensive streaming. 2 barks, 3 barks. And he he's on it there. But I need to go back and just look at that. But we have streamed defenses all week for our dynasty, all year, I'm sorry. And I think it's helped more than hurt, but that's just kind of, I haven't looked at the metrics yet.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to break down using FPPC scoring because that's the only place I really play with the defense.
Yeah,
I'm going to break that data down this
yeah,
year and I'm going to try to see if I can apply like an MVP index, a
yeah,
weekly value type of concept to defenses. But I think what we're going to find is that defenses change a lot
yeah.
during the course of the year. And a good scoring defense in fantasy football, I think, is usually more targeted to a bad quarterback on the opposing team more than anything else. But again, like everything, Professor, we
Yeah.
have a theory. We're going to test it.
Gotcha. And so I do have efficiency data. Minnesota, number 1, Buffalo, Pittsburgh. Boy, I don't know. Houston, I don't know, Dennis, about that, but this is the last 3 weeks. It didn't count this week. So I'm just trying to get a sense for that. Cincinnati, pretty good. Las Vegas, Denver's, Atlanta, Cleveland. So some of those are not so good. The home away splits In orange, they love away. Blue, they love home. And so I use that in our metrics, Dennis, for this week. So do you want to do the uh, Squirrel Huskies, or what do we want to do? Do you want to go through?
Yeah, yeah. Let's do the Squirrel Huskies, but I want to make one comment
Okay.
based on this data. You can't fall in love with one piece
No, no.
of data in football prognostication or even fantasy football prognostication. You have to use this data in a wise way, and it's not always going to work. Like we saw two fluke games this weekend where Kansas City, it should have been a closer game against Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh just couldn't get anything done. So the efficiency got trumped by a really strong defensive effort. And in that Houston game, I'm still trying to figure out what the heck happened
Yeah,
because I had a lot of Fairburn at kicker come up with a zero in the
that
fantasy
was
football
Dennis.
playoffs.
That's a black swan there.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you cannot try to avoid those black swans because you'll miss the other swans. If you take that 1 in 20 opportunity out, you're going to miss more than you're going to gain. So I think you have to take your lumps on that one. But I have found this efficiency data, and what I found more than anything else is if they're improving their efficiency, that's what I look for in the handicapping. But let's go to the Squirrel and Husky. I don't even know how juicy of a Husky games we have this week because some of our faux Husky games last week were not very good.
Yeah, so let me go through the. By the way, Dennis, the lines have dropped to near 37 on three or four because of injuries and other things. So Minnesota Green Bay is a good one, 48. And the best one, the huskiest, is Detroit and San Francisco. So you'll look at some squirrel games.
Let's look at some squirrels first, and I know we've got a bunch of those
37.
this
Yeah.
week.
So let's see. The worst are New Orleans, Vegas, Philadelphia, Dallas is intriguing for a lot of. There's like who's not there,
Ooh, boy, yeah.
and Miami and Cleveland. So those are the worst this week, Dennis. You want to,
Let's look at the Cowboys Eagles first.
yeah. So let's find them. They're right there. So Dennis, this dropped with Lamb being out. I think it was like 40, and it dropped two and a half
Oof.
points. So Vegas said, you got Cooper Rush. We don't know what's going on there. And now you got your, potential Hall of Fame guy sitting. Uh, they got 26 to 10, Philly.
Wow.
And Philly has Kenny Pickett. So get
Wow.
that. So Vegas, hey, Vegas says 26, even with Kenny Pickett. So
Wow.
that's on the face of it, 37 looks higher than I would have. Maybe that's just my fantasy. I don't have that faith in any of these teams. I think Philly should beat Dallas just because of who they have going, right? AJ Brown, Saquon, Devonta Smith. It seems like they have a lot more going than Ezekiel Elliott and Brandon Cooks, right? And
And Rico Dowdle,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, Rico. Okay,
Rico's been
he's been hit or miss.
okay,
Yeah,
but he's
hit or
still
miss.
not. We're not talking great
We're
players
not
here.
talking Saquon Barkley levels.
And it's possible even Tolbert misses the game for Dallas, so you're
Oh,
down
good.
to
And and
Cavante
and
Turpin.
and so Denver. I mean, for Philly, it's almost play everybody, Dennis. Maybe even stream the Philly D. Maybe if you're
Yeah,
desperate.
yeah,
Uh,
possibility.
yeah, looks like the tight ends and running backs but I'm not worried about Saquon. And is
No,
Goddard playing or is he out for the season?
Goddard's out, so
And
you're
I
looking at
haven't been
Calcaterra.
impressed. Yeah, but
No,
I haven't been impressed. He hasn't stepped up to anywhere. It's not like he's strange down there
no.
in Jacksonville that on weeks, I remember streaming him earlier in the season and we're getting some 10-point games or, some nice fill-in games. Calcaterra, I can't remember a good game from him,
So
Dennis.
yeah, in week
And in
14,
Dallas, you shouldn't play anybody now,
oh
according to
yeah,
this.
yeah, I'd have a hard time playing anybody on Dallas. Calcaterra had 2 10-point games
Yeah,
this year, week 6 and week 14,
that's weak.
when Goddard was out.
That's
And
weak.
and he has had since Goddard left. Okay, so these are all with Goddard out games.
Yeah,
He's had 0, 3, 1, 8, and 8.
Dennis,
You
those
know,
are
with that 10.
daggers to your
Oh,
fantasy football team.
those are
That's
landmines.
yeah.
Those are horrible games. And but here's the thing: it's helped Devonta Smith. So Devonta Smith has actually had better production since Goddard has been out. Like that's interesting. So, you know, Devonta's come on with 13, 28, and 11 since Goddard went down. So I'm looking at that and going, okay, if Devonta plays this week, even with Kirby,
So basically, he's pulled a 60% calm in the last 3 weeks. Not bad.
yeah,
That's
even with
a wide receiver 2-3 type.
yeah,
Sure
and
is.
even with Kenny Pickett most of the game last year or last week, he had 11 points. So
Yeah.
Kenny Pickett, oh man, Kenny Pickett versus Cooper Rush. That is the
Yeah, but
matchup
the
we were
Vegas
hoping for.
says, 3 touchdowns from Philly. Is that two to
Yeah.
Saquon and a tipped ball into AJ Brown or Devonta's hands? Is that what they're
Well,
guessing? I
I,
don't
I
know.
get. Yeah, like you said, this game without Dak, but with CeeDee Lamb,
Yeah.
with Hurts expected to come back, was a 47 and a half over under down to 37 and a half. I can see, I can make an excuse for Philadelphia to have 24, 27 points. Dallas might be lucky to score 10. So I'm looking at the under on this. And boy, I'd have to take the Eagles minus the 7.5. This could be a 17-0 shutout.
Yeah. It could be a 10-0 even.
Yeah, yeah. This is not going to be a game where obviously you're playing Barkley, obviously you're playing AJ Brown, probably playing Devonta Smith. After that, I'm not so sure I'd want anybody else in my lineup from either team.
Yep. Okay. So do we want another squirrel?
Let's
Sucky
go to one
squirrel?
more squirrel. Oh my
Miami,
goodness.
Cleveland, or
Let's do Miami, Cleveland.
okay. By the way, I will say I had Vegas one of the lower efficiencies, but you wondered, imagine Brock Bowers on a good team.
Oh boy.
You know, I don't know. That's the thing. It's kind of like Kyle Pitts has had to deal with the same issues. So
Yes.
you wonder about some of these Hall of Fame guys. Is some of that clearly talent, but is some of that just talent from the coaches, from the quarterback? Just being in the right team, the right years. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but I'm just saying, imagine Brock Bowers, and he keeps for fantasy football, he's going towards the Hall of Fame first year. He's moving in that direction. But imagine next year, it's still kind of the same old with the quarterbacks. That
Well,
will be
remember
sad.
remember Kyle Pitts, his first year at over 1,000 yards.
That's what I'm saying.
So
Boy,
am I expecting Brock Bowers to go a similar route? No, not at all. But you always have to look at these situations and say, what else has Las Vegas had?
yeah.
They've had nothing at running back that will be impressive to you. And they got rid of Devontae Adams. Since then you got Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker. Myers is okay, but he's not a WR1 type.
No, he's a
So,
good 2-3 type.
yeah. So, Brock Bowers on this team, there's a reason that he's the only option. And, but the impressive thing is teams haven't been able to take him out of the game very often. So, that's been a
Yeah.
pretty
I
amazing
just
run.
wanted to hit that, folks, just
Yeah.
to let you know. And by the way, both these defenses are streamable there. But
Yes.
I just wanted to hit that a little bit, that it's not just, I wouldn't play Brock Bowers this week because of fish. No,
No,
it
I
just
plan.
tells me he
Yeah.
might be the only one I'd play, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Him and Jacoby Myers are about it.
Yeah.
If I'm desperate, I'm playing Madison this week, but that's it.
Yeah. So
I
here's
mean,
Miami,
it's lean.
Cleveland,
Yep.
25-12. It's almost like the Dallas Philly
Oof.
37. It's almost the same story, Dennis.
Yep.
There, but I will say Tua's there, Tyreek's there, A-Chain's there. So I wonder, in other words, so Philly has Saquon, AJ Brown, Miami has A-Chain and Tyreek. So you telling me Pickett is Tua? What I'm saying is, I try to think about what Vegas is thinking. I feel like Miami has a little bit more oomph potentially than Philly as far as the quarterback. And so what I'm saying is the over under might be harder to deal with. I'm not playing any of these squirrel over unders at all, but I'm just saying if I were to pick one of these three, I might consider this game because Tua could, have a decent game. I just don't know if Pickett's going to have it's just hard to see through that mist there, Dennis. But anyway, Miami against Cleveland, it should be all about the passing. But I don't think they can, even though the defensive daps say tough, can they stop A-Chain, especially if it
No,
gets a swing
no,
pass? Or
I don't think so.
wouldn't play the kicker, but I would play the Miami D, and I will be streaming them this week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's extra easy all day long, Dennis. Cleveland looks like they're going to have to win or stay up by passing. You can play the kicker. They're almost going to get touchdowns, so that kicker could get four. That's where that 12 comes from, Dennis. So I don't even know the kicker, but anyway, the Njoku should have been there. He's out. So I don't even know. Aiken, no, I wouldn't. I would have played Njoku with that DAP. Not
Yeah.
now. Not now. I'm not playing. So I guess Judy is a flex. I'm trying to think who else am I
Yeah.
playing here,
That's
Dennis,
it.
from Cleveland.
That might be it.
And
And I'm even
Cleveland is
scared there.
declining, having the
Oh,
last 3 weeks 25, Miami 35. Both of them love away games. Miami gets the away game, Cleveland doesn't. How about that?
yeah.
We don't see a lot of both teams don't want to be at home. Cleveland at home uh, passes 8% more, rushes less, and that's exactly what so I would weigh that Cleveland gets what it wants for its tendency. Miami is pass less, rush a little more, and that's exactly opposite that. So this is kind of a tale of DAPS versus tendencies. And again, Dennis, I do want to chart this. I'm just not sure what I'm going to measure at this point here. I got to think about how I'm going to, sometimes you think of the variables you want to look at, but then how are you going to measure those? So I hadn't decided what I'm going to do yet on that, but I just wonder if that's telling us anything at all. I don't know the answer, Dennis, or I would tell you this means this. I don't know. I just make note of declining. What does that mean? Is that telling us anything? I make note of it because I'm charting that, but I hadn't had time to gather the data. So if you want to be an intern, once again, I got questions. Dennis has questions. We could use interns, and you're saying, well, what do we get? Well, if you're an intern, you get to be part of the secret stuff, and we can share. Maybe not the double secret extra stuff, but we'll give you the whipped cream. We may save the cherries for ourselves, but still, it's better than nothing, right? What's the what's the folks on the radio going to do for you? I don't know. They're not going to give you their extra stuff. You got to pay for their extra stuff, and then you wonder, is that really their best? Come on. What are they doing here? Dennis and I are trying to be as transparent as we can. I posted our metrics. All you had to do is print it out in the draft night out, folks. And if you're listening, I don't think you are because you probably, you think your stuff's better, and that's fine. Keep thinking that. We enjoy that. We'll match our stuff to our process to yours. Anyway, Dennis, that's what I say. Got to play Tyreek. Jonnu Smith is viable. A-Chain, I think, is viable. I just think Tua could do more than Vegas thinks here, but I'm still not playing the over-under.
Yeah, and add some rain and possible wind to this
Ooh,
game, and
didn't
it
even
it
factor that.
complicates things even more. So I like the under in here. Miami will still be able to run all day and run enough to beat Cleveland. So I like the -6.5. You're playing A-Shane, you're playing Tyreek Hill, you're having a decision on Waddle, you're playing Jonnu Smith. On the Cleveland side, you're probably stuck playing forward on a lot of teams
Yeah.
and maybe playing
Judy.
Judy, but that's it.
That's a deep flex.
I'd be looking other ways in order to make my picks here. Let's get rid of these nasty squirrels. They're leaving a stringy, greasy taste in my mouth, and let's go to some of these big old
How,
Husky
how
games.
about Minnesota Green Bay?
I
And then we'll
like
go
that
to
one.
the last one,
Yes.
Monday night to finish off this season. 48 and a half, Dennis. That's kind of juicy.
Oof, that is a
Minnesota,
nice one.
Green Bay, 2 point, 1 point. Dennis, it's a pick 'em.
Love
Okay.
those.
So Vegas says Minnesota's at home, but Green Bay is so good that it's still only 1 point. So that's interesting. Look at the
Oof.
DAPs. DAPs say Minnesota beware. Looks like play your
Wow.
Hawkinson has an opportunity. Running backs have an opportunity. I wouldn't play the Minnesota D against Green Bay because they could get hot. Green Bay, play your wide receivers all day long. So Reed, Wicks, I don't know if Watson's playing. I don't know what else. Running back, Jacobs, he can earn his biscuit. He just may not get 2 touchdowns, but I think he'll get you 13 points, Dennis. And you could play the D. I'm playing the D in a couple just because they are pretty good at takeaways. Darnold's not immune to takeaways. And so that's how it looks. Minnesota 107, Green Bay 80, 78. That's not bad. And they're both improving teams. And guess what? Minnesota loves home. At home, they pass much more than rush. And really, it's a little bit against the DAPs on that. They should rush a little more than pass. But, uh, you know, that's not how it is. Green Bay away wants to rush more, pass less. And that's exactly opposite. So both these teams are facing opposite tendencies, even though they're improving the last three games. So that's interesting. So what does that mean? They're improving, but the DAPS versus their tendency for home away splits, pass and rush is opposite. So I don't know if that all just kind of washes out, or is that telling us something we just don't know what it's telling us.
Yeah, that's a tough analysis here, and I'm going on a simple premise that I think Green Bay's defense is getting better down the stretch. And so I'm going to take Green Bay for the upset here. Green Bay's been playing solid all around football, um, both offense and defense. I just think they're going to pull off the upset. One thing I do like is the over on here because even with those tough daps, I think Minnesota is going to be able to get some big plays deep because you in Jefferson and Addison, you've got two wide receivers that are just so dynamic. So it's hard to cover all of the options that Minnesota has.
Yeah.
So I would be looking to play as many players from this game as possible because I think it could be one of the very few games that gets over 50 points on the total score this week.
So
I think
you'd
there's going to be
play
a
the
lot of low
over.
scoring games. I'd play the over. I like this game. I'll play the over. I don't think it's going to be over by much, but maybe low 50s. I think both teams are going to be able to get some big plays against the other defense
So we
and be able to
got
get the ball deep.
money line Green Bay, play the over. Where's your third leg, Dennis?
Third leg is probably,
Touchdowns?
if I can get Love with two touchdown
Okay.
passes,
Okay.
if they'll give me that, I'll take that. I'll take uh maybe Kraft getting a touchdown at tight
Okay.
end.
Okay.
But boy, I think there's going to be a lot of points here, so I would like to play a few of those opportunities in
Yeah.
that game. Final game, and I think this is going to be a good one. I think we're going to see a
The
lot.
curtain
Woo!
closes on the fantasy football.
Oh, and I think we're
Miracles will
gonna.
be abounding at 50
Yes.
points. There's going to be a lot of chatter on Twitter, and I can already see it already. What a bust. I told y'all I was right. Or, boy, I sure picked a great, player this week. Whatever it's going to be, it's going to be exaggerated. It's going to be way beyond. And Dennis, whoever it is or whatever the big surprise is, it's going to probably skew the ADP for next year's draft. I don't know who it's going to be, but people are going to overthink this and overplay it, and it's going to be wonky. And you know, I don't know what it's going to be, Dennis. It's going to be goofy. And so Detroit 28, Frisco 21. So 4 touchdowns versus three. Sounds like 7 touchdowns. Wow. 3.5, 50, 7 touchdowns. Wow. That's going to help everybody, I hope. But I will say, Detroit, it looks like Jamar Gibbs all day long.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's part of your parlay in there. I guess if you're doing a Husky parlay, maybe this is the third leg here. I don't know. I think Gibbs should get a touchdown. St. Brown, he can find an extra tough. I do worry about who's the number two wide receiver. Hey,
Jameson Williams.
Williams.
I'd avoid Williams in this game.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about that scenario, Dennis. I would play the defense if you need a stream. San Francisco, all about love. Purdy, I'm playing in a couple, and
Oh
wide
yeah.
receivers.
Yep.
So I think Debo has an opportunity to redeem us from his shitty, can I say that, shitty on the radio, crappy season, Dennis. And Kittle should get me some points right there. I need some touchdowns to Kittle, and I need a Debo. And
break
Yeah.
breaking news.
Oh shit.
Breaking news in another game.
Oh
And with these DAPs, it comes into play. Remember the team we were showing where I was recommending Ramondre Stevenson?
yeah.
Starting lineups announced Gibson ahead of Stevenson as the starter. I'd pivot to Samuel in this game. On that one team of yours, you got 2 minutes to make the change and get
Okay.
Stevenson out of that lineup.
Okay. So I think, Dennis, I had. Oh, you're
Oh,
right.
you were going Chiggy. You were going to go Chiggy
Yeah.
over
So
them
I
anyway.
need to
Yeah,
go
I'd get
read.
Stevenson out of that lineup and go a different route with that running back quickly
Yeah, I did. I got Reed, and then I can flip from Reed or Samuel then
to
to
Chiggy.
Chiggy if I
Yeah.
can get that. So that's good. Uh,
Yeah, don't like
so
when I usually don't listen to coach speak much, but when
well, I think he
players get
fumbled
announced,
last week,
he fumbled and he also didn't handle
and
that
people were,
lateral very
and
well.
yeah,
And
so people were cranky.
yeah,
But
I'll
I
still play him in a
remember,
I'll still play him a couple of leagues where I'm really desperate and I need, but in that league for you, I think you had the options. I would get away from Stevenson just in case. You have
uh,
some other options in
yeah,
play.
I am, Dennis, I am stopping what I'm doing. We'll get back, but I better make sure I try it. This is Saturday game. Does it start at noon?
It starts in 1 minute.
Oh my
It
goodness.
locks
So
quickly.
I'm okay, I'm
I
cool
just took
there.
him out of the lineup in one league for me, and I'm playing Devontae Smith over him. So
Okay, free and fine. I
there
don't
are
think
some
I've got
last
him.
minute changes that
I don't
sometimes
think
have to
I've
be made, and this is
got
why I
him.
don't like Saturday games.
Yeah, I hate Saturday games. Saturday games suck here. Let's see. What am I doing here? Bucky. Yeah, everything's fine there. I don't think I've got him anywhere else here. So I think you may have. Of course, now with the when he gets 5 touchdowns, I get to crab at you. It's your damn fault, right?
Yeah, I'd
In
fallen for
in that fantasy football, what we're supposed to
that's
do,
yeah,
it's
I would
Dennis's damn fault. So I do have Williams, Dennis. So
and in one league, Professor, I have both Gibson and Stevenson on the team. I'm not playing either one.
yeah, so let me look at the last and maybe real quick. You can talk me off the ledge on Williamson. Let's see, my last one. I'm maybe too late to lock, but I don't think. Ooh, is there anybody else? Trouble is on this league, Dennis, I ain't got anybody. I got Zacharias. I got
Ugh,
Gasecki. I got Higby.
ugh.
Yeah,
I'd play Stevenson over
yeah,
those guys. Yeah,
I
there, because even with the coach speak, even with Gibson getting,
he might get a red zone or something.
you're still going to get some plays off of Ramondre Stevenson. I still think he's good for, worst case 6 to 8 points, but in that one league where you had other options, I wanted to
Yeah,
make
I
sure you
did,
got him
and
out of there fast.
I put him in there. So let me let me share. Let's go back to the Detroit game, and then maybe before we shut down, you can talk me on Williams here. So anyway, Detroit is 83 last 3 games. San Francisco is 64. Detroit hasn't been. San Francisco loves home away, Dennis, and I don't know why they do, but this metric says they don't. So don't know about. I'm not going to pay attention to that. Detroit away rushes 12% more, passes 29% less. Exactly what the apps are giving. Frisco at home passes a little more, rushes a little less. But I will note, and this is something to chart, they are below league average on both rushing and passing.
Wow.
One is league average. So they are 9 and 4% below passing attempts and rushing attempts, Dennis, in the last 3 weeks. So they have not been doing much of it either. It's not, see, I use that to say kind of passing, rushing, what's happening. But in this case, there's not the only team. They're below league average in both. So Frisco has been sad, actually. And the DAPs, again, say passing all day long. You don't want to play the D.
Yeah, and I like Detroit to win this game. I think that 3.5 is a good spread. I think they'll win it by more than that. I love the over in this game. I think there's going to be a lot of points. Detroit has been vulnerable to the deep ball, and I think Purdy's going to have a good day. I do think Goff will be able to have a decent day. But I really love Jamar Gibbs, and I love the Sun God in here. I don't care that it's extra tough at wide receiver. I've seen San Francisco vulnerable to the short passing game, and I think that's what Detroit will be able to feast on, that and their running game. As far as the San Francisco players, Debo I like in here, not as much as I did last week when Garendo was out. I'm expecting Garendo to play, but I'm also not expecting Garendo to be 100%. So Debo will still get some carries from the backfield, and he'll still get some opportunities. I do like Jawan Jennings in this matchup. I think he's better off this week than he's been in the past couple of weeks against this Detroit depleted defense. On the Detroit side of the ball, other than Jamar Gibbs and
Sun God.
the Sun God, I'm not crazy about Jamison Williams in this
And
matchup,
Laporta.
and I'm not crazy about Laporta in this game. I think Detroit's going to have to try to run the ball and control with the short passing game
So
to
you
try
still going to
to.
play Goff
I'll
over
still play
Purdy?
Goff. Boy, if I had Goff and Purdy on the same team, I'm probably still going with Goff based on the difference in their ratings right now. Goff right now is QB6 and Purdy at QB12. They've got a difference of 21 points in consensus. That's enough to still go with Goff, but boy, it's close. It really is close. There's no weather concerns. So I think this is going to be a high scoring game. I like both quarterbacks in this game. You can score points against San Francisco. San Francisco against the best teams has been giving up points. They gave up 29 to the Dolphins, and they gave up, you know, they gave up 35 against the Bills. They gave up 35 or 38 against the Packers. So against really good offenses, they've given up a lot of points. And then their defense got tough against the Rams, and it got tough against the Bears. So it's weird how they've been really good or really bad. And so I think Detroit will be able to leverage that really bad and score some big points.
So in the my team here, Dennis, I have Jamison Williams in. I can flip him for Thielen and put Chiggy in the flex.
I think I would do that. Jamison Williams he's got that wide variance of where he will perform. He could be as little as a 4 or 5 point game. He could be as high as a 20. Like if I was going for upside,
Yeah.
I'd probably still have
Well, let's
Jamison Williams
see.
in there
What
because
should I
one
do
deep
for
ball
upside?
can
Yeah.
get you 12 points with him,
So
just like that. And he's been hot, but he's had games of 0-1 this year. So I just think there's a huge wide variance with him. And Shiggy, as weird as it sounds, might give you more protection on the low side. I wouldn't mind playing Jamison Williams if I had to, but I'd understand going in, he's going to give me 6 or 26. Like there probably won't be a lot of middle ground with Jamison Williams this week. And
I'm
that's
looking
the
at
big
my
concern.
opponent here. My opponent's playing Love and Pollard, but he has Cook. So he's got some issues there. Higgins, I like. Jefferson, Laporta got an issue. Brian Thomas, it's gonna be close. They say I got 155, they got 144. So, and I've got Henry already gone, so I have one player less. But right now with Chiggy in there, I'm 10 points ahead. So, Dennis, I don't know if I need as much upside, you know. In other words, I'm thinking maybe see, so to me it's Williams or Thielen. What do you
Yeah,
think?
and there's a situation where, oh boy,
Or
that's
hey, to
or
complicate,
you could
I
play
got Debo.
Debo.
Yeah,
You could go Debo as well.
versus
Yeah,
Thielen. So,
yeah. There's you've
so
got here's the thing. You got three very good choices because I do think, you know,
I mean, you don't have
boy,
to. We don't have to decide now,
yeah,
but
here's a case, Professor, where I might go with the upside for both, and I might play both Debo and play Jamison Williams and figure both aren't going to have an off game at the same time. And I'd bench Thielen and Chicky and roll the dice because here's the thing. Are you going to get a healthy James Conner later today too? That might simplify your decision. So if Conner can't start today, that's another situation. Where are you on the scoring on the projections with those two guys in?
155,
Yeah, you're
and
just about the
my
same.
opponent is 144.
Yeah, it's
So
about the
10
same
point.
with those guys in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So if I look at those guys now, it's 157. So
yeah,
gives me two extra points.
yeah, and here's the strategy on that one. It could also rain down in Jacksonville, so that could put some difficulty on that game. Whereas you
Well,
got
he's got
two
some good
guys,
players.
he's got some good guys, but you got some strength there because you're going to be wheeling and dealing with some interesting players, and now you can flex Thielen for
I
Connor
mean,
if Connor
if
is a
Connor's
stretch.
out, then I'm probably flipping Thielen in there
And
or
remember,
Chiggy.
Connor's also a Saturday game, so you got to watch that one carefully
So let
today.
me ask you this: Thielen or Chiggy? If I have to put them in over Connor,
I'd probably, boy,
what's your
that's
metric
tough.
say?
So if I look at the data on here, um, I've got Chiggy right now. Chiggy um, just made the list here this past week because prior to this he was under 12 points on that upside value score. So he was at 11.9, and I don't
Yeah.
put anybody over 12. Everybody has to get 12 or more. He jumped up to 13 and a half here the last 2 weeks, but he is my uh, tight end 25, and Thielen right now is he's had a very nice rise here of late, and he is at he's at my wide receiver 37, so they're very comparable. Like they are
So I'm
very
thinking Chiggy
close.
gets at least 6 catches. So that's 9 plus yards. So I figure him for 15. So can Thielen get me 15?
Let's take a look at the matchups for that Panthers
Yeah,
Buccaneers game.
yeah, let's look at that. And let's see here. So let's see. That was one of the crappy games, wasn't it? Yeah, let's see. Here we go. Come on, John. Carolina, it says play Thielen all day long
Yeah, and I would say even more so because running game, they're not
versus
going to be able to run against Tampa.
versus.
They're going to be having to throw a lot.
So I think the possibility is Thielen's upside
I might
This,
take I might take Thielen's upside over Chiggy's because I think he's got a better shot at getting in the end zone.
let's see, Jacksonville, Tennessee. See, Tennessee, they both have good matchups, but Tennessee loves home. They're away. But Jacksonville gives it to everybody.
So
Boy,
here's an interesting way to look at the data. So Chiggy's upside value number now is 13.5.
yeah.
Now that's not calculated for tight end premium. So even if I attach an extra half and a multiplier on that, that brings
So let's
his
say
number.
15.
Yeah, that brings his number up maybe as high as 20. Thielen's is 22.1. So I think
So
Thielen.
it's a close decision. It's something I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
chew on.
it's a close one, but I'd
Any
give the edge to
weather
Thielen.
in Jacksonville.
Possibility of weather on both sides of the coast. So we'll break that down closer detail
Are
tomorrow,
you
a
still
little
on
closer to game day.
are you in Coventry talking weather tomorrow?
We might be talking weather. I haven't given him the update yet for the week, but there are quite a few different possible weather
You might want
events
to,
this weekend. So I will reach out and let him know.
yeah, yeah. And if you get on there, put it on Twitter so our people can listen to you pontificate about the weather.
And follow me at DMike
Oh,
Media on
definitely.
Twitter, and I'll be giving some weather updates because these are tough situations. For Florida, it's generally more of a showery type precipitation. And generally speaking, I'm a little bit more worried about the Jacksonville than the Tampa because they're both early games, and Jacksonville tends to get that showery activity earlier in the day than Tampa does. Tampa tends to be a later shower event on the west coast of Florida. It's just one of those weird things the way the sea breezes work. But that's not to say this will be identical because this is more of a front driven system. And I'm not at a position right now to say which has the better chance of getting rain. I'll wait until 11 o'clock tomorrow morning to make the decision on the noon game. Sometimes with weather, that's how close you have to be to get it right for fantasy football circumstances because it's the wind, it's the rain intensity, and the rain frequency. And those are hard to forecast even just 24 hours out.
Sounds good, Dennis. I guess we can shut this puppy down for the season.
So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. Check out all the data from the professor. My consistency rankings are up there as well. That might be one of your tiebreakers for decision making for this championship weekend. Go with your gut, folks. Feel
But don't
lucky.
get cute.
Don't get cute. Go with dance with the guys that got you there, that brung you. And come on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks. Whew. We sure had a lot to talk about.
We had a lot to talk about, but there is always a lot to talk about on championship weekend, Professor.
That's right. So next week, are we going to still do a Wednesday and a Saturday?
Let's do a Wednesday as more of a recap of what happened.
Okay.
And we can chat, and then we can decide.
Is there a
after
Thursday
that.
game?
There is no Thursday game next
thank
week.
goodness
so
for
that
that.
is good.
That's an advantage.
We can break down props and stuff on the Saturday one, and then set up what we're going to be. What are we looking at?
Well, we'll talk playoffs
Yeah,
because don't you play in a playoff league or something?
I'm in a playoff one again with Reedy.
Do it for his charity. It looked like a worthwhile charity.
Yeah,
so everybody should look into that. Follow Mike Reedy, one of our pals.
Yeah, Mike is one of the more sane people in fantasy football. He understands the logic
Mike,
of stuff.
here we go. If everybody in fantasy, all the experts, okay, and you would shake them in a box, Mike would still be there after the wing nuts flopped out. So you get rid of the wing nuts, Mike is still there. So Mike, that's where we see you in the science of faith. We see that you're there with us. We're all together. What's left after we jettison the wing nuts?
Yeah, Mike is one of those people who's not just a noisemaker
No.
in this world. He gets the volume idea. And he puts out one of the best reports every week where he looks at the touches and targets
Yeah.
at each
Love that.
position. And it's really interesting data to watch and to see how it's going. I would much rather chase opportunities than chase points.
Yeah, I like that.
And he does a good job of breaking that data down. His money makers and heartbreakers article that he does every week,
Yeah.
That's one of the very few things that I will factor into my decision making.
Nice.
Because if Mike is putting a player in either of those categories, he's got a good reason to do it. And he's very discriminating. He only puts a few in each category each week, and his hit percentage to both the upside and the downside is pretty incredible. He's got a good knack at understanding those guys, and he doesn't take the easy options always. Mike Reedy is a guy that you should be paying attention to in fantasy football.
Uh, it just hits me that we probably should, next couple of shows, maybe have a little segment on him, Coventry, Kellogg, Tip Major, some of kind of people that we like to follow and listen to. So, we should kind of round that up, give people some folks to target for next year and start paying attention. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because, and here's the thing: it's not to say that that's going to be an all-inclusive list,
No, 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 no.
okay? But it's kind of us doing the Siskel and Ebert thing.
Yeah,
If we're both thumbs up on a guy
yeah,
or a lady in this industry,
yeah.
I think people are going to find that there's a logic to how they are coming up with their selections that makes good sense. And if you got a good process, and of the big name guys, the guys that I find to have some very interesting insight on players, love the way Kellogg looks at data and looks at things. Love Bob Harris. Love Jeff Mans. He could.
Dennis, Ramondre Stevenson started, Gibson did
Oh,
not.
Jesus.
Somebody is saying that Jared Mayo said Gibby's going to start for us today, and he didn't. What a
Unbelievable.
Trixie. That's
Well,
fine. I think I had to keep the one in. I agree with how we did the other. I'm not sour at all, but I just
yeah,
thought,
three and out on the first drive
yeah,
for
but I'm
New
just kind of
England. So
laughing. Yeah,
yeah, it's typical this coach speak stuff. You just never know what to believe anymore. You
yeah.
really don't. And we're not seeing
Looks like Drake May looks like
Dobbins
he
did
had
start.
headed to the medical tent 6 minutes ago. So I
Ooh,
don't know if he's in protocol or not. I hadn't been watching.
ouch.
You and I have been talking, but I don't have Drake May on any of my teams. I did use him in
Yeah,
streaming, but not
yeah.
on any of my teams. Okay, Dennis, I think I'm gonna stop because you and I have about gone all where we need to. We need to watch some